Hello everyone and welcome to my channel Y&R Trends. I hope everyone is having a wonderful day. Before we begin, please hit the subscribe button and give this video a thumbs up. Holden, whose charm often masked a streak of unpredictability and obsession, had arrived at a crossroads in his relationship with Matt and Claire. A crossroads that was as perilous as it was emotional. The truth, which had been simmering beneath the surface for weeks, was about to be unleashed. And Holden's eyes betrayed a cold determination as he whispered the words that would send shockwaves through the lives of everyone involved. I'm going to tell the truth. The very air seemed to tighten around Matt and Claire, the couple whose life had been a careful balance of love, secrecy, and survival, as Holden's gaze locked onto theirs with unflinching intensity. In that moment, Genoa City itself seemed to pause, holding its collective breath as if aware that a storm of unprecedented magnitude was about to hit the lives of the ones who thought they had navigated every twist and betrayal the city could throw at them. Holden's threat wasn't idle. It was precise, calculated, and devastatingly personal. By taking their daughter, the one innocent soul in this tangled web of deceit and ambition, to Genoa City, he wasn't just challenging Matt and Claire. He was threatening the very foundation of their family, their sense of security, and the fragile equilibrium that had kept them afloat amidst years of intrigue, rivalries, and heartache. Claire's eyes widened, the maternal instinct flaring fiercely as she instinctively moved to shield her child, sensing that this confrontation was no longer a battle of words, but a harbinger of a confrontation that would change everything. Matt, who had spent his life trying to protect those he loved from the corrosive influence of Genoa City's endless scheming, felt a surge of panic and resolve intermingled. He knew that once Holden made a decision, he would pursue it with an unwavering ferocity that could leave ruin in its wake. The thought of Holden physically taking their daughter, dragging her into a city rife with old grudges, secrets, and vendettas, ignited a fire of desperation and courage within him. The room seemed charged with electricity, the tension so palpable that even the walls of their home seemed to quiver under the weight of the unspoken consequences. Every second stretched into an eternity as Holden's words hung in the air, an unyielding proclamation of intent that left no room for misinterpretation. You think you can keep this from me? The truth doesn't belong to you anymore. Holden continued, his voice a chilling mixture of conviction and menace. Matt's jaw clenched, his mind racing through every possible scenario, every potential ally or obstacle, every legal loophole and personal confrontation that could prevent the imminent disaster Holden promised. Claire, meanwhile, felt the cold shadow of dread settle over her heart, the protective instincts of a mother warring with the rational calculations that had always guided her in Genoa City's treacherous social landscape. The daughter, blissfully unaware of the storm swirling around her, clung to her mother, a living symbol of innocence that seemed almost to mock the bitterness and scheming of the adults who surrounded her. The psychological dance that unfolded in the room was a masterclass in tension. Holden, controlling every inch of the conversation with the precision of a chess grandmaster, tested Matt and Claire's emotional resilience, pushing boundaries and probing weaknesses, while they responded with a mixture of defiance, fear, and calculated negotiation. Each word, each glance, each subtle shift in body language carried weight, threatening to tip the fragile balance into chaos. And all the while, the city itself loomed as both backdrop and participant, its history of betrayals, corporate battles, and familial drama, a silent chorus that echoed the stakes of this confrontation. Holden's threat wasn't just about a single act. It was a declaration of power, a test of loyalty, and a harbinger of chaos. As he outlined his plan, subtly revealing pieces of information that only he possessed, the implications grew more terrifying with each revelation. Matt's mind churned, desperately calculating contingencies, allies he could call upon, and strategies to prevent the nightmare he now faced from becoming reality. Claire, feeling the pulse of fear and anger intertwining in her chest, began to realize that Holden's intention wasn't just to assert dominance. It was to manipulate, to destabilize, and to force them into a corner where every decision would carry monumental consequence. The narrative of their lives, which had already been punctuated by drama, betrayal, and moments of fleeting happiness, now spiraled into a new chapter, one where the stakes were higher, and the potential for irreversible loss loomed ominously. In this moment, Genoa City was more than a setting, it was a character, a silent witness to the unfolding drama, reflecting the power struggles, the emotional intensity, and the moral ambiguity that defined the lives of its residents. Holden's impending action threatened not just the physical removal of a child, but the unraveling of trust, the shattering of emotional bonds, and the reshaping of alliances across the city. And as the minutes ticked by, the tension crescendoed, the emotional weight pressing down on every character, every decision, and every potential outcome. The narrative hung in balance, teetering on the edge of calamity, as Holden's resolve collided with Matt and Claire's desperation, promising a confrontation that would echo through Genoa City for months, perhaps years to come. The interplay of fear, determination, and the looming threat of exposure created a dramatic tableau so intense that it captivated the imagination, forcing viewers to confront the raw emotional stakes at play. Every whispered word, every subtle glance, every heartbeat became part of a story that was both intimate and epic, personal and universal. A story that would test the limits of loyalty, courage, and the enduring power of family ties amidst the relentless currents of ambition and desire that defined the young and the restless. Holden's presence in Matt and Claire's home was more than a threat. It was a catalyst, a force of nature that disrupted the careful equilibrium the couple had maintained, and as the seconds stretched into minutes, the psychological tension became almost unbearable, a coiled spring ready to snap with consequences that none of them could fully predict, and Holden, ever observant, noticed the subtle tremor in Matt's hands, the barely perceptible tightening of Claire's grip on their daughter, and he recognized the fear not as weakness but as confirmation of the control he had already begun to exert, a control that was not merely physical but psychological, weaving a web of doubt, guilt, and foreboding that crept into the minds of both parents like a shadow slowly swallowing the light, and as he spoke, revealing just enough of his knowledge about past indiscretions, hidden truths, and unspoken secrets to unsettle them further, the couple realized that the stakes had escalated beyond anything they had anticipated, for Holden was not just threatening action. He was threatening revelation, a dual-edged sword capable of cutting through the layers of protection they had painstakingly built around their lives, and every word, every calculated pause, every almost smile carried with it the weight of impending chaos, making it clear that Holden's intent was not merely to abduct a child but to fracture the very core of their family, and to use that fracture to assert his dominance, and extract satisfaction from the unraveling of their carefully constructed lives. And Matt, sensing the gravity of the moment, felt a surge of protective instinct, coupled with a growing anger, a fire igniting in his chest that demanded action, that refused to allow Holden's threat to go unanswered, and he began formulating strategies, mentally racing through contacts, legal avenues, potential allies, and personal confrontations that might counteract Holden's plan. But each potential solution carried risks, each option fraught with the possibility of escalation, and he knew that any misstep could not only endanger their daughter but also irrevocably damage the fragile web of relationships, reputations, and power structures within Genoa City itself. And Claire, feeling the mounting pressure, oscillated between fear and determination, her maternal instincts urging immediate defense while her rational mind tried to calculate the consequences of confrontation, the likelihood of negotiation, and the potential fallout if Holden's intentions were not thwarted. And in that moment, she realized that their daughter's safety was inseparable from their ability to read Holden, to anticipate his moves, and to navigate the treacherous emotional and social landscape he had created, which meant that every glance, every syllable, every micro-expression could serve as both warning and weapon in this escalating game of psychological chess. And as Holden continued to speak, revealing more about the information he possessed, the alliances he had formed, and the consequences he intended to unleash, the room seemed to contract, compressing around the three of them with a suffocating intensity, as if the walls themselves were complicit in the drama, bearing witness to the stakes that had become almost unbearable. And outside, Genoa City remained oblivious to the immediate crisis, yet every whispered threat, every subtle hint of impending action carried implications that would ripple outward, touching business dealings, friendships, rivalries, and even media attention, as Holden's plan was not simply a private vendetta but a public statement, a disruption that would inevitably draw eyes, gossip, and consequences across the city. For in Genoa City, nothing remained hidden for long, and the interplay of personal vendettas, professional ambitions, and social dynamics meant that every action could have amplified effects. And Matt, feeling the burden of responsibility, realized that they were not just defending a child, they were defending a fragile equilibrium, A sense of normalcy that had taken years to construct and that could be shattered in moments by Holden's unrelenting pursuit. And as Claire clutched their daughter, the child's innocence stark against the tension-filled room, she understood that Holden's threat was more than literal. It was symbolic, a test of resilience, courage, and the bonds that held their family together amidst a city that thrived on scandal, betrayal, and the dramatic unraveling of lives. And as the confrontation continued, every subtle motion became laden with meaning. Every pause in dialogue a suspenseful interlude in a high-stakes performance where the outcome was uncertain and the consequences could be devastating. And Holden, sensing the effectiveness of his psychological strategy, pressed further, dropping hints about secrets he had uncovered, knowledge he had gained through observation, manipulation, or whispered confidences, all calculated to destabilize Matt and Claire emotionally, to induce doubt, fear, and hesitation, which he knew would make them vulnerable to both physical and emotional coercion. And the couple, realizing the magnitude of the threat, felt the crushing weight of responsibility, the moral imperative to protect their daughter from harm, and the desperate need to anticipate every possible contingency, every potential intervention, and every subtle misstep that could tip the balance irrevocably. And as they navigated this tense standoff, their minds became arenas of strategy, their emotions raw and heightened, their instincts sharpened to an almost supernatural acuity, aware that the smallest sign of weakness could embolden Holden and accelerate the execution of his plan. And yet, in this crucible of fear and confrontation, there was also a spark of determination, a realization that they could not yield, that surrendering control even psychologically could invite disaster. And so they engaged in a delicate dance of resistance, negotiation, and emotional fortitude, striving to protect the child, preserve their dignity, and maintain the fragile control necessary to prevent immediate catastrophe. And outside, the city's rhythms, oblivious to this microcosm of suspense, continued, its streets, offices, and homes humming with lives, unaware that the drama unfolding in a single house could have cascading effects throughout its social fabric. And Holden, fully aware of this larger stage, leveraged not only his personal leverage over Matt and Claire but also the potential amplification of the drama through social and professional networks, understanding that fear, revelation, and the threat of loss could influence not just immediate actions but longer-term relationships, reputations, and even business dealings in Genoa City. And as the standoff extended, the psychological stakes intertwined with the practical reality of a possible abduction, creating a tension that was simultaneously intimate, emotional, and citywide in consequence. A perfect storm of personal and social suspense. And Matt and Claire, each in their own way, grappled with the challenge of protecting the daughter while managing the emotional assault, legal implications, and social repercussions, a multifaceted struggle demanding ingenuity, courage, and a keen understanding of human behavior under pressure. And Holden, ever calculating, recognized the dual victories inherent in his plan. The immediate disruption of a family unit he sought to dominate, and the longer-term psychological and social ripples that would ensue across Genoa City, embedding fear, uncertainty, and intrigue into the very fabric of their lives. And as the minutes passed, stretching into what felt like hours, the family's cohesion, resilience, and trust were tested in ways that were both immediate and enduring, demanding decisions that could protect the child physically while also safeguarding emotional stability, social standing, and the fragile bonds of love and loyalty that sustained them. And the entire confrontation became a study in the psychology of power, threat, and human response, illustrating how fear, manipulation, and the prospect of loss could shape behavior, elicit courage, and test the limits of endurance. And yet, in the midst of this, there were glimmers of hope. The instinctive protective strategies, the mental calculations, and the emotional resolve of Matt and Claire suggested that while Holden might control the threat, he could not fully control the response, and the dynamic interplay of intention, action, and consequence promised that the ultimate outcome, while uncertain, would hinge on a combination of psychological resilience, strategic ingenuity, and the enduring strength of familial bonds. And in the end, the confrontation was not merely about a child or a threat. It was about the fundamental human struggle to assert agency, protect loved ones, and navigate the complex interplay of fear, power, and morality in a world where every action could reverberate far beyond the immediate moment. And as the tension reached a crescendo, every heartbeat, glance, and word became a measure of courage, foresight, and the capacity to confront and endure adversity, setting the stage for a series of events that would reverberate throughout Genoa City, altering relationships, shifting alliances, and forever changing the lives of those involved, leaving viewers on the edge of their seats, caught between the suspense of impending action and the profound emotional stakes that define this epic confrontation in the world of the young and the restless. As Holden's shadow loomed over Matt and Claire, the emotional and psychological stakes intensified with every passing moment, transforming the very atmosphere of their home into a pressure cooker of fear, strategy, and raw human emotion. And the knowledge that Holden was capable of executing his threat with meticulous precision forced both parents to confront the reality that Genoa City was not just a backdrop to their lives but an active participant in their struggle, a city whose streets, offices, and social networks could be leveraged against them, manipulated, and weaponized by someone as cunning and unpredictable as Holden. And the tension was not merely interpersonal but existential, for in the city where ambition, greed, and secrets had long been currency, a single miscalculation could irreversibly alter reputations, alliances, and even the fate of a child. And as Holden continued to outline, in subtle yet unmistakable terms, the extent of his knowledge about their past, missteps, hidden alliances, and vulnerabilities, Matt and Claire were forced to reevaluate every decision they had ever made, every conversation that had been private but might now be used as leverage, and every trust they had extended in the complex social fabric of Genoa City. And in this crucible, their responses became simultaneously defensive and strategic, a delicate balance of emotional resilience, calculated negotiation, and instinctual protection of the child, for any outward show of weakness could embolden Holden, while any rash action could trigger immediate consequences that might escalate beyond control. And as Holden's words dripped with the precision of a predator who understood both the physical and psychological dimensions of his power, the couple felt the weight of the impending crisis press down on them, a weight that encompassed not just immediate danger but potential long-term fallout that could affect every aspect of their lives, including professional reputation, family bonds, and social standing within Genoa City's unforgiving landscape. And as the minutes stretched, the air thick with tension, Matt's mind raced through tactical options, recalling every contact, ally, and piece of intelligence that might offer leverage or intervention, while simultaneously calculating potential fallout, both immediate and cascading, as any attempt to confront or outmaneuver Holden could trigger retaliation that extended far beyond the walls of their home. And Claire, standing resolutely with their daughter in her arms, felt the duality of maternal fear and steely determination, understanding that she was not merely a passive participant but an active agent whose choices, responses, and subtle manipulations of body language, tone, and expression could influence the course of events, buying time, creating hesitation, and perhaps even planting seeds of doubt in Holden's mind, even as she internally acknowledged the precariousness of their situation, where the line between courage and recklessness was perilously thin. And as the standoff continued, the psychological interplay became a high-stakes game of maneuvering, with Holden probing for weaknesses, testing resolve, and subtly threatening exposure, while Matt and Claire countered with a combination of strategic silence, careful wording, and emotional control, each aware that the smallest slip could amplify danger and increase the likelihood of Holden acting on his threat to take the child to Genoa City. And as Holden's eyes flicked between Matt and Claire, reading micro-expressions, noticing subtle shifts in posture and tone, he understood that his power was not absolute but contingent upon maintaining the psychological upper hand. And so he pressed further, weaving references to past conflicts, unspoken betrayals, and long-buried secrets into his dialogue, each a carefully aimed psychological arrow designed to destabilize, distract, and ultimately coerce. And Matt, sensing the tactical dimension of this confrontation, realized that he had to operate not only on the level of immediate protection of the child, but also on anticipating Holden's broader intentions, which included potential public exposure, reputational damage, and manipulation of social networks. For Genoa City was a city where personal, professional, and social lives were inextricably intertwined, and a crisis in one sphere inevitably radiated into others, amplifying stakes and complicating decision-making. And as the confrontation escalated, the room itself seemed to shrink, the weight of fear, anticipation, and potential tragedy pressing down upon them, creating a hyper-intense environment where emotions, intellect, and instinct collided in a crucible of drama that demanded perfect clarity, unwavering courage, and a keen sense of timing. And Holden, fully aware of the psychological pressure he exerted, continued to leverage every element available. His knowledge, his unpredictability, his perceived moral authority, and even subtle hints of potential allies willing to enforce his plan, crafting a scenario in which Matt and Claire were forced to navigate not only the immediate danger but the broader social and emotional ramifications of their responses. And as the minutes became an eternity, both parents felt a profound awareness that every second counted, that delay could be both ally and enemy, and that survival required not only immediate action but careful orchestration of perception, timing, and influence, as any overt struggle could escalate into physical confrontation, and any subtle misjudgment could trigger wider consequences, potentially involving friends, family, or even city authorities. And in this tense dynamic, the innocence of their daughter became both a shield and a vulnerability, for her presence magnified emotional stakes, guided instinctual responses, and intensified psychological pressure, while simultaneously providing Holden with a focal point for coercion, threat, and emotional manipulation. And as Holden's words and gestures wove a web of implied consequences, past grievances, and potential future exposure, Matt and Claire had to navigate the treacherous balance between assertive resistance, strategic acquiescence, and protection of their child, understanding that the outcome would reverberate across multiple dimensions, personal, emotional, social, and professional, within the intricate ecosystem of Genoa City, and every subtle glance, every measured phrase, and every hesitation was laden with meaning, a test of composure, intelligence, and resolve. For in this high-stakes confrontation, psychological acuity and emotional fortitude were as vital as any physical intervention, and the layered interplay of threat, strategy, and emotion transformed a single household into a microcosm of the city's ongoing dramas, reflecting themes of power, control, family, and survival, while also setting the stage for future ripple effects that could alter alliances, reputations, and even business interests across Genoa City. And as the standoff continued, the intensity of emotion escalated, fear and determination coalescing into a concentrated force that demanded action, yet required patience, calculation, and foresight. And Matt, sensing the imperative to act while avoiding provocation that could trigger immediate escalation, began weighing options for intervention, including legal measures, negotiation tactics, and potential alliances that could be called upon discreetly to counter Holden's threat, while simultaneously preparing for the physical reality that Holden might act without warning. And Claire, tuned to the emotional nuances of the moment, balanced maternal instinct with strategic thought, aware that her responses could influence Holden's perception of control, potentially creating hesitation, doubt, or openings that could be leveraged to protect their daughter. And in this tension-filled environment, every decision carried outsized consequence, with the potential to either stabilize the situation or precipitate disaster. And the complexity of the scenario highlighted the intersection of psychological pressure, social awareness, and familial responsibility, as Matt and Claire grappled with threats that were simultaneously immediate, personal, and citywide in their implications. And Holden, fully attuned to the mechanics of psychological leverage, continued to manipulate, provoke, and unsettle, reinforcing his dominance while leaving open avenues for Matt and Claire to respond, as he understood that maintaining tension was itself a form of control. And the prolonged standoff became a masterclass in the art of psychological engagement, strategic positioning, and the high-stakes management of fear, hope, and uncertainty, with every word, glance, and gesture operating on multiple levels, shaping both the immediate outcome and the broader narrative trajectory of their lives within Genoa City. And as the confrontation reached a crescendo of emotional, psychological, and strategic intensity, the narrative tension was mirrored in the potential ripple effects across the city, where friends, rivals, and observers could be drawn into the unfolding drama, creating a scenario where personal choices intersected with social perception, professional consequences, and the unpredictable dynamics of human behavior under extreme pressure. And in this crucible of suspense, Matt and Claire's responses, measured, instinctual, strategic, and emotionally charged, would determine not only the immediate safety of their daughter but also the unfolding trajectory of relationships, alliances, and reputations in a city that thrived on drama, intrigue, and the delicate balance of power, influence, and loyalty. And the story remained unresolved, suspended on the edge of action, consequence, and revelation, leaving a charged and suspenseful tableau that demanded continued attention, deep emotional engagement, and anticipation of the dramatic fallout that Holden's threat had set in motion.